Hey, what is up? Welcome to this episode of the Wantrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofermento, and I am so excited about today's guest because we throw so many big buzzwords around in business, and one of those big buzzwords is data. It's something that none of us can ignore in any of our businesses. There's so much to think about. There's so much to compile and organize and try to make sense of. And that's why today we've got an amazing guest who's actually going to help us make sense of our data, understand what data is valuable, and most importantly, what we can do with that data. And actually, I didn't tell him this off the air, but he's also one of the brilliant minds behind the growth of one of my favorite companies in the world because it is a tennis-related company. So today's entrepreneur is in the field across industries doing deep and meaningful work. Let me tell you all about him. His name is Dave Aaron. Dave is a data and analytics leader with over a decade of experience creating business intelligence and analytics solutions. After stints leading data practices at Wayfair and Landing, he founded the Boston Data Company in 2023 to help businesses of all kinds create or level up their data environments. So if you're sitting there thinking, I don't have a data environment, what is that? Well, that's exactly why we've brought Dave on for today's episode. He lives in Boston with his wife and 2 young children. He is also one of us. He's a fellow entrepreneur. He doesn't just do these things because he's a subject matter expert. He helps other businesses do it through his own brand. So I'm excited to learn from him today. I'm not going to say anything else. Let's dive straight into my interview with Dave Aaron. All right, Dave, I am so excited for you to be here on the show today. First things first, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Brian. Appreciate it. Really excited to be here.
I will say I'm always particularly excited to have fellow New Englanders here on the show, and you and I grew up not too far from each other, so it's really great to have you here, but you've got to take us beyond the bio first. Who's Dave? How'd you start doing all these cool things?
Yeah, absolutely. So like you said, Boston, born and raised. I was in school and trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I really liked the business aspect of things. I was undergrad business at BC. I started to get way more into technology and started building websites and iPhone apps. And then I really learned about data and business intelligence specifically coming out, or really when I was still in school, and kind of went down that path and really haven't left it. So I've always looked for things that sort of combine an entrepreneurial passion with being more involved in technology and data. So that sort of led me down this career path.
Yeah, I love that overview, Dave, especially because you so correctly and quickly point out that it's intertwined with technology, with business. All of these things play together. And so that's why, for me, having this chance to talk to you today, thinking about my own businesses, thinking about all of our listeners around the world, it's something that we're all confronted with because we probably, I would argue, we have more data than at any point in history, whether we realize it or not. I think that's the beauty of the tech piece of it, is that just by doing business, whether we just use Stripe, for example, or whether we have Google Analytics installed on our website, we unintentionally have so much data at our fingertips. Where do we begin to start looking for data in all of our businesses?
That's a great question. And yeah, it really starts with the basics. And I think you can go a really long way with the basics. So, in any business, you have some sort of revenue coming through. So you have sales volume and you have transactions, and you have likely website activity if you have any sort of digital presence. So like you said, one of the first things I recommend doing is looking at the different pieces of software that you're leveraging, the different business processes that you have, and thinking through what data can I be collecting from here? And to what you mentioned in the introduction, how do we action on that? And how do we actually use some of that to start making different decisions?
Yeah, and thinking about that, obviously today, what's going to be most fun for me is that we're going to bring it to real life business examples because, Dave, you've done this across all different types of businesses. And I'll share this with you so that you can directly speak to our audience, is that a lot of entrepreneurs, we convince ourselves that our situation is entirely unique. And someone will hear you talk about data and say, well, yeah, that makes sense for a company that has a bunch of salespeople, or that makes sense for someone that that sells physical products like a Wayfair, for example. Of course, they're obsessed with their conversion metrics, but what I appreciate about your work is it transcends industry, it transcends business size, it transcends all of that. Talk to us about that universal nature of data and the importance at all different levels of business.
Yeah, it's my favorite part, to be honest, is going in and getting to work with businesses of different sizes, of completely different industries, and their problems are extremely similar. Even though their business context, even though the actual data that they have can be very different, the core problems persist across industry, across sizes. So, one of the biggest things that I see pretty much regardless of industry, regardless of size, is the need to have a source of truth, a really common data set that helps you understand your core business metrics. And that is something that is a real challenge for businesses that, especially that don't have a full-time data staff or have a really small team. That is something that's really pervasive. But what's really cool is, you really do see a lot of patterns in terms of what data is being collected or what data should be being collected, what actions should be taken off of data. And, whether you have a SaaS business where you're looking at, usage of a product and retention, or you have more of a, physical retail business and you're looking at things closer to website conversion or operations and return rate, you start to see a lot of patterns in the data that matters to be collected and the actions you can take off of it. So it's really cool when you can start connecting the dots between, very different industries and very different organization sizes.
Yeah, take us across that bridge, Dave, because this is going to be fun. I'm very excited. I'll humble brag for you about the awesome client roster that you've got. You work with, for example, once I saw Scott Baxter's video on your homepage, I was just like, yes, you are part of what's driving Player Court's leverage and market penetration across the country, which for all of us tennis players, that's very exciting because the more people that use that, the more players that we can find to play with. And so along those lines, whether it's Scott with Player Court or whether it's a local web designer, whatever it may be, the goal for so much of business is, of course, growth. We want our businesses to have more revenue and for sure have a higher profit margin. We want to have that net profit at the end of the day. How's data the tool through which we get there? Connect those two dots for us.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'll go a little bit deeper on Scott and Player Court because that was definitely one of my favorite engagements. So this is an example. So Player Court, like you mentioned, Brian, is a tennis community, folks across the country, the largest tennis community in the US. And they really have two key parts of their offering. One is a membership platform where you can sign up and be matched with fellow tennis enthusiasts, kind of like a Tinder matching style. And you can find new playing partners. And then they also have an area where you can get professional lessons from tennis coaches. So for them, there's a couple angles. One is really understanding their membership base in a lot of detail. They have different offerings in terms of membership quality and what you're getting, and really understanding who their subscribers are, how they are being retained and where they're not being retained, and digging into reasons behind that. And then really helping on the different aspects of their business operations. One area is marketing, really understanding the different marketing channels that they are investing in and figuring out where they're getting good return on investment and where they're not getting return on investment. And one of the first things that we uncovered was, if we do the math, one of the big marketing areas that they were investing in wasn't yielding the results that we were looking for. So we made a conscious choice to make some shifts and ultimately get a lot more return on investment by doing that. So, again, it kind of speaks to, regardless of the industry, regardless of the subject area, there are commonalities around getting smarter about your marketing spend or really getting better about understanding your customers and your customer retention to really dive in and make critical changes that actually alter your end bottom line.
Yeah, gosh, I so appreciate the behind the scenes glimpse into a real life project that you've been a part of. I think that it's so cool because it's impactful. And when you talk about return on investment, just as a consumer and as someone who's been in the industry and seen Scott's growth with Player Court, I think it's cool because all of those smarter decisions allow him to reach more people, allow him to grow even more. And so it's a really important function. I want to talk about the workflow behind that function. How frequently should we or do your clients look at their data? Is this something that we embed into our weekly workflow and we should have some sort of dashboard or whiteboard on the wall that's constantly what we're looking at every day that we wake up? Is it a monthly review of things? How do we embed data into the decisions and the workflows that we have?
Great question. Answer is yes and yes. So there are certain things that should be looked at really routinely. Whether this is every day when you wake up is one of the first things that you check. I get a dashboard of my business's data sent to me first thing in the morning. And what I recommend for that is if you have data that is really going to help you make decisions or change the course of your day or your week, those are really the ones that I recommend, making part of your day-to-day workflow. And then there are also different metrics and different lenses that are helpful to look at more on a monthly or less regular basis. So this is where your, end of month stats look like. If you have estimates onto how many leads that you think you were supposed to get in a given month, how much conversion you expected from them, things that are a little bit more lagging in nature. Those are really good use cases for things that you check. Maybe at the start of the month, you kind of look at it as a retrospective, look at what happened, and then think about how is that going to alter the course of going forward. But I think in terms of things that are more of a daily workflow, it's like your operational day-to-day bigger situations, things that you would act on during the course of that week are the more important things that you want to look at routinely.
Yeah, Dave, you brought up a very important word, and I want you to go deeper there because you talk about lagging indicators. I think about when I was in my early 20s and I started a marketing and SEO agency in central Massachusetts. I was going to Chamber of Commerce events and I was going to BNI events, and I was looking at, is this rewarding me with revenue? And I was making those decisions. But of course, I had to stick at it for a while until it started to yield those referrals. Talk to us about that nature of lagging indicators, what that means, how we should gauge them. And of course, the patience element comes in here as well.
Of course, yeah. Lagging indicators are a big part of your data. And those are really things that, like you said, Brian, really take a while to materialize. So things that kind of are good outcomes, such as revenue, such as deals being signed. Those are not things that you necessarily know are going to happen when you take the action. When you're going to those conferences, when you're having 5 discovery calls with a client. You're not measuring the outcome of that because it hasn't happened yet. So the more you definitely will need some of those lagging indicators, but more important, you also need to look at leading indicators. So things that give you an early understanding of how things are going and if they're on the right track. So in this case, that could be, your early part of your lead gen. How many leads are you talking to? How many of them are converting into discovery calls? How many of them have you been able to send an initial proposal to? Those are things that you can, start to look at that are earlier in the process and give you a better sense of your health. And, if you start to see that you don't have the lead volume that you need, you can take action to drive more marketing or go to more events. If you aren't getting the conversion you need, that's where you can start thinking about, how do I change my sales process? Do I need to have more calls, more collateral for my prospects? So it really helps you dive in and understand, where you need to improve, and more importantly, gives you the advance notice. Because the last thing you want to do is, be looking back on your metrics at the end of the year and, realizing, oh my God, I missed all my sales targets. But if earlier on, I'm not getting the top line amount of leads that I need to generate my end result sales, then you can take action on that before it's too late.
Yeah, very well said, Dave. It makes me really excited to ask you this question, although it's a bit of a nerdy one, and I trust that you're going to make sense of it for our audience who's listening here today. And it's about I guess I'll put it in the context of with my marketing hat on. So when it comes to paid ads, we're always obsessed with attribution tracking, because the problem with today's world is that if I click on an ad, let's say I'm visiting my parents and I click on an ad on their computer and they're logged into Facebook and I'm interested in something. And then, a week later, because I saw that ad from my phone here in my hometown, I then go to their website and manually do it. That's not necessarily going to get tracked. It is so hard in the marketing world to master attribution tracking. And so I guess to use that as an example, but still dumb it down, is that it's hard always to just say this is the metric that we're tracking and relate it or correlate it directly to an intended result. How do you make sense of that in data? Because there's so much that's going on that can't necessarily directly be tracked.
Yeah, that's a fantastic question, and attribution might be the hardest thing collectively in data to get right. So there's a couple things. One is you have to just be comfortable with the fact that you're not going to have those direct correlations all the time, and you start to build more of an intuition around what correlations are really clean and what can you trust as, if this is telling me a certain thing, that I can really go with it and not ask any questions. But you really have to be critical and skeptical of anything in your data environment. And there are some things more so than others, and you have to supplement the data with your intuition. The Facebook example is a great one. If you go off of an attribution where you're requiring someone to click on an ad and then purchase the item, you're missing out on anybody who viewed that ad, didn't click, but it became top of mind and then went and made a purchase. So, just knowing that, you have to kind of go under with the assumption of, well, I know that my actual contribution is going to be higher than what my data is showing, so I need to take this with a grain of salt. Or, for an attribution situation, you can do something called a holdout, which means, you don't show ads to a group of people or a specific segment. And then you understand, what the true sales volume difference is between the people who got the ads versus those who didn't, to help get you a better measure of what your attribution actually is. But it kind of goes back on a broader level too. You have to always be skeptical of your data, and you really shouldn't take anything at face value. You should always be questioning, what are the nuances to this data? What are the assumptions that make this not a clear-cut answer? So, always approaching data with a healthy degree of skepticism.
Yeah, I love that. Dave, maybe not the advice that people expect to hear from someone who works in data and business intelligence and analytics like you do, but it's cool to see because, again, that skepticism, that healthy skepticism, also allows you to bake in some intuition. You brought that up, which I think is such a powerful force to ultimately just continue making better decisions. So I love the fact that you consider that there as well. I want to broaden the conversation a little bit, though, because I feel like way too frequently in business conversations, we get very ROI focused. And here you and I are, I'm a marketer at heart, so I will frequently hijack the conversation and talk about advertising and marketing. But I also recognize that many things aren't done for the end goal of necessarily ROI. Goodwill is a real thing. Brand awareness is a real thing. That brand awareness may not result in anything for us for a year or 3 years or 10 years. Talk to us about those other outcomes that we can positively identify thanks to using data that may not reflect when it comes to measuring ROI.
It's a great question. So yeah, there are a lot of different things that you can affect that. Whether it's a lag before you'd see any real, revenue output, or are basically impossible to correlate, that still instinctively are good for you. So social media following is one example of that, or brand awareness, or things like net promoter score is a big one, where that if you have customers that are happy and really speak to your product, that you have a better chance of retaining them, and you have a better chance of them leaving reviews or telling their friends, which spirals into more business. So the biggest advice I can give is stick to the things that you that are no brainers in terms of you want to improve, even if you can't make a clear connection between that and revenue. You absolutely know that a higher NPS or more brand awareness is going to lead to those outcomes, even if you can't quantify it. So you absolutely should be making moves to go in that direction, even if you don't know, I raised NPS by 5 points, I should expect 100K additional revenue. You don't know that, but you do know that, the more you increase, naturally, the more business you're going to do. So you should take the efforts to make those moves. And, for any of those metrics that, may not tie directly to the bottom line, the advice, just like any other metric, is get into the next level of detail. So understand, the breakdown of, I'm kind of harping on NPS because I think it's a really important one, but, understand, how that is divided between your newer customers and your repeat customers. Understand how that's partitioned by things like your different products, and the reasons behind that and where you're falling short. Because, you really need to dig into a second or third level of data to figure out, what aspects you really need to focus on improving to up level the entire metric.
Yeah, Dave, you are harping on Net Promoter Score, and I will tell you this, in over 1,000 episodes, you are the first ever guest to talk about Net Promoter Score. So now I'm going to invite you to talk about it even more. What is Net Promoter Score? Why is that so important? That's the metric. You jumped straight there with the answer to that question. What the heck is it?
Yeah, Net Promoter Score is kind of the most common way of measuring customer satisfaction. So it's taken by asking a really simple question of your customers or clients, which is on a scale of 0 to 10, how likely would you be to recommend this product or service to a friend or colleague? So a really simple way of asking, and the calculation behind it is a little bit more confusing than it has to be. But in short, the higher the better. And ideally you want something kind of closer to the 50s or 60s or even 70s. But it is very dependent on industry, and there's also a lot of bias between, people who have bad experiences are going to be more likely to talk about it. So you have to take it with a grain of salt, but directionally, the higher the better. And the more likely you are to get positive feedback on review sites, and the more likely someone is going to be to refer you to their friends and family. So, higher NPS is a really good indicator that, things are going well, that your customers are happy. Even if you can't necessarily tie that to revenue, it's one of the cleanest ways that you can measure customer satisfaction.
Yeah, I love the fact that we're going here in today's conversation, because it's something I hadn't even thought to ask you, but the more we're talking about this, I'm thinking that this is a great example in the fact that we're only going to obtain this data if we ask for it. So a lot of data we inherently have in our businesses. We've talked about quite a few of those things today, but something as important as Net Promoter Score, you just revealed. The only way to get it is to email your customer base and say, how likely are you to recommend us to a friend? Yeah. And so what are other examples of either things we should be doing or questions we should be asking that will yield more valuable data for our businesses?
Yeah, I think in general, just the more you can ask your customers, the better. And basic surveys really go a long way. I think one of the themes that I really believe in, and that I think we're covering today, is you can get a long way with very basic data, even in this age of AI and really a lot of exciting developments. Like it's the basics that can yield a lot of information. So simply asking your customers things like, what are the things that you like about our product? What are the things that you don't? Or what are the opportunity areas? And just grouping those answers and figuring out what the themes are in that can go a long way to informing, your product roadmap, or things that you might not be as aware of just by looking at the data that, the business is naturally collecting. So, just going out there and talking to your customers, but really doing it in a way where you can get synthesizable data to take like really clear actions, is just something that I think a lot of companies leave on the table.
Which also makes me realize that we're this deep into the conversation, and I feel like we've had such a strong bias towards quantitative data, but now you're talking about surveys. Dave, how much do you value qualitative data, and how the heck do we make sense of it?
Yeah, it's definitely valuable, and again, I think that's something we overlook a lot. Because that's a really good point, Brian. I think when you think of data, we kind of jump to quantitative and just very easily, digestible, but there's a lot of qualitative data out there. So yeah, I think it matters a lot, but it's the most impactful if you can turn that into digestible insights. It's one thing if you are going through and trying to read 200, 300 different survey responses, or listen to, hundreds of customer calls, which is super valuable to do, but ultimately it's the synthesis of that matters. So, there's a couple of methods that you can take, in terms of surveying. You can have qualitative feedback, but supplement it with categorization of, would you please rank the best parts of our product or the things that you would like to improve? That's something that you can really easily take and group and figure out, what are the key actionable steps. The other thing you can do is, feed it into an AI tool or something of that capacity, and you can cluster responses and say, what are the different themes that are coming out of all of this qualitative feedback. So there are definitely a lot of ways to kind of take that and turn it into something more quantitative, and that's really recommended in order to kind of group it and see, what are the most common pieces of qualitative feedback or qualitative insights that we can get, looking at all this less structured data.
Yeah, Dave, you went there, so I'm going to follow you there and very much push you into this part of the conversation. Of course, it's about AI. Obviously, it is making our lives easier in so many ways that we're all grateful for. You just gave us a tangible example of dump all those survey responses into AI. Let it begin to make sense of it and find those patterns. What are some other ways that AI is changing the game when it comes to data and making sense of it and turning that data into decisions?
It's a great question. I mean, there are so many different things that you can do with AI. I think from my standpoint, one of the most useful things is actually helping me build data solutions. And it can take a lot of the work off of our plate in actually, building the tools and building the data sets that are ultimately going to be useful. I think that is sort of an underrated aspect of it. One of the really cool things that it can do also is produce really amazing synthetic data sets, meaning sample data. So, in my case, when I'm speaking with potential clients, I really want to show them the capabilities of what we can do and what we can build. It's one thing to, talk about past work that we've done for another client. It's another thing to build them a mock-up dashboard in 2 hours that, shows them the capability of what we could do if we focus on their business. And AI can really help with that because you can give it a couple of prompts, and our good friend Claude can, spit out a bunch of different logic that will essentially, give you a script. You can run it, and it builds a sample data set for you. So one of the really cool applications of AI is actually making the data development lifecycle a lot faster. And that's just on, the development of data side. That's not even speaking about, ways that you can interact with data and have AI synthesize and make sense of it, where there's a lot of opportunity in that regard that I think is just, we're just scratching the surface on.
Yeah, that's very cool. Gosh, even just hearing you talk about example data sets, it takes me back to college. How frequently do I wish that we had those types of things? Because we were, I don't know what you were doing at BC, but at Bentley, right down the road from you, we were doing mock business plans and all of that. And we just had to make up businesses with our imagination. Mm-hmm. It would have been so much easier to have customer avatars and everything fully fleshed out using AI. So very cool to hear the way that you are in real life integrating that into your own workflows. And I'm sure even just shifting a little bit of gears and talking to you entrepreneur to entrepreneur, it's helping in your sales process. I'm sure people can actually see it and imagine it when you're talking to them about the powers of it. So very cool, very grateful for you sharing that transparently with us. Dave, I want to put you on the spot here because I called it out very early on in the intro to this episode about data environments. A lot of people will be thinking about their own businesses and all the different tools that they have. I've called out Stripe, for example, is a very common payment processor across our audience, and Google Analytics is obviously a great web analytics tool, and it's free. Everyone should have it installed on their website. Quick plug to all of you listeners. But Dave, what are some of those common places that people can find the data in their businesses? And then what's a data environment so that we can centralize and access all of this data?
Yeah, so you hit the nail on the head there, Brian. It's really about centralizing it. And that's something that can be a little challenging to do, but is 100% worth the effort. when you have an environment where you can access data that's coming from, your point of sale system, that's coming from your website traffic, that's coming from your operational data and your ERP, and really being able to mesh all that together into a single place is really what I refer to as a data environment. Before you go down that path, it's really about understanding the different processes that you have and the tools that are supporting them. You can get started with a lot of, even Stripe, has some reporting capabilities embedded in. A lot of the core SaaS tools that are being used today have reporting capabilities, which are great places to start and start digging around and really understanding what's out there and how things are performing. But to get to the next level, it's really about getting that data ingested into a common location and being able to, explore and look at dashboards that sort of consolidate all that information and really give you an end-to-end understanding of how things are going and really get you down to that next level that a lot of tools don't offer out of the gate.
Yeah, I love that answer. I so appreciate your insights there. I want to ask you this question. I don't typically ask this during interviews, but I do feel like it's probably a little bit of a different scenario for the brand new entrepreneurs, the ones that are still looking to get their first customer or client. Dave, I'm curious, if any, what sort of insights you have for them, because they're probably listening to you and I talk today and saying, well, I don't have any data just yet. I don't even have a single client. Like, where should I be looking? How can I unlock all of that? And I guess my mind goes to maybe they can leverage competitor analysis. Maybe they can leverage more macro data out there. What's your insight for those types of entrepreneurs? Because I want to remind listeners that, Dave, you are also one of us. You also started your own business in 2023. So with that in mind, you want to make smarter decisions in your business. And just like our listeners do, what's your advice to those entrepreneurs or super, super early stage entrepreneurs?
Yeah, I think the number one thing would actually be don't worry if you really don't have a thorough data environment. If you're just getting started, it's definitely something that becomes more important as you have more clients and more sales volume and more different processes running. So number one is, don't worry too much right when you're getting started. But if you are getting started, it's really thinking about the pre-sales things that are going to be important to measure. So number one thing pretty much in any business that you're talking about is a funnel. So, whether you're in professional services and your funnel is, all the people that you've worked with in the past, how many of them might be interested in your services, how many of them are going to take a demo, or if you're in retail and you want to know how many people visit your site, how many people add to cart, how many people check out, the concept of funnel is very consistent across different industries and businesses. So the first thing I'd recommend is really making sure that you can measure that funnel. And you can get started very easily. You can use HubSpot, which is free for a lot of situations. And, you can start registering your deals through there and registering prospects that you've spoken to and get an understanding of, what your typical pipeline looks like, how many people you're talking to on a regular basis, making sure that that's a healthy number, making sure there's a healthy number of people who are could be interested in your services, and then start tagging how you came across those individuals to figure out where your lead sources are coming from. So one of the things that I do is, mark down, did this come from a person in my network? Did this come from, one of the professional networks I'm in? Did this come from a referral for one of the technology partners that we work with? And the more you can understand, where that volume is coming from and how those leads perform, then you can start digging in more and engaging more in those areas and figuring out what channels work. So, it is challenging when you don't have a lot of clients or when you don't have a lot of data. So I wouldn't fret terribly much, but, just starting to get in the habit of collecting that. And, even if it's just the basic early steps of, how many people are seeing my LinkedIn page, how many people are, viewing my content, that's a great place to start.
Dave, you didn't just give advice there. You actually laid out an actionable plan for every single listener here. So I really appreciate that. I have no idea how you're going to top all of that advice. Oh, quick plug. I love the fact that you plugged a fellow Boston-based company in HubSpot. So always love those Boston brands. Dave, I don't know how you're going to top all of this advice with my last question, which is, what's that one takeaway that you want to impart on all of our listeners? Knowing that we're being listened to by both entrepreneurs, which you just laid out an action plan for them, as well as the more seasoned entrepreneurs who are looking to reach that next level in their business. You're also one of us. You're not just a data guru. So what's that one piece of advice that you want to impart on them today?
Yeah, I'm going to switch to the more of the entrepreneur side for this one, because the number one lesson that I picked up, just being in this spot for a little bit over a year now, is there's so much value in having a process where you are putting yourself out there, you are networking, you are following up on leads constantly, goes such a long way. And I don't think I fully understood, especially going in, or a lot of the folks that I talk to who are in similar spots, understand the dedication and the amount of time it takes to work in your network and, check in and understand if there may be potential opportunities, and then to really follow up with them. If someone you talk to is not interested in the moment, making sure that you're sending a follow-up email in 3 to 6 months. It's just really the basics and things like that, but staying on top of it and, again, using a tool or something just to make that easier. But I don't think people understand how many conversations go into to one sale, because for every one client that, you're able to bring on, you probably had 30 conversations with other clients and talked about potential opportunities. So just understanding how much of your time and how much of your effort needs to be on sourcing and on constantly engaging with your network and potential opportunities is extremely valuable.
Yes, that is incredible advice from the real life experiences of an entrepreneur. And Dave, I want to praise you very publicly, because not only are you a wealth of knowledge, but I'm going to go one step even further and say that genuinely in today's conversation, you've made data sound fun. And the reason why you've done that is because you've truly given all of this data a point, is that you've always linked it back to the growth and the results that we're all interested in. So huge kudos to you. As someone who interviews a lot of business owners, I know how difficult it is to take our subject matter expertise and make it apply universally, speaking to such a broad audience. And Dave, you succeeded in that. So I hope that listeners are very keen and excited to find all of the work that you do and how you help other businesses implement this in their businesses. So drop those links on us. Where should listeners go from here?
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Brian. I appreciate that. It's been really fun to chat. So our website is bostondata.co. So please feel free to go on there, learn a little bit more about us. If anyone is interested, feel free to shoot me an email, dave@bostondata.co, and we'd be happy to chat.
Yes, listeners, you already know the drill. We're making it as easy as possible for you to find the link to Dave's business website down below in the show notes, no matter where it is that you're tuning into today's episode. Super easy to remember because you're listening to two Bostonians right now. Just go straight to bostondata.co or click right on through from the show notes. We're also linking to Dave's personal LinkedIn, so if you want to reach out to him and one-on-one, continue that conversation, don't be shy. Unlock the powers of Dave's expertise. I would argue it's actually you get a huge unfair advantage because Dave is bringing with him everything else he sees behind the scenes and under the hood of other businesses for your advantage. So definitely don't be shy. Check out those links down below. Otherwise, Dave, on behalf of myself and all the listeners worldwide, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you, Brandon. It was a lot of fun. Appreciate it.